This film is made by the Gypsy and Traveller communities for the Gypsy and Traveller communities.
It's about the Covid-19 vaccine.
There are so many questions about whether it's safe and whether you need it at all.
We wanted to get answers, and so we're visiting a doctor we trust.
Dr. Tim from the Arch Clinic in Brighton.
So thanks so much for inviting me to FFT. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to chatting about the vaccine and how it works and answering any questions you've got.
I've got a question, Tim, if I can start.
Yeah, of course.
So once I have the vaccine, can I actually get ill from the vaccine?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think the most important thing to know is that it's impossible, completely impossible, for the vaccine to give you COVID. The way it's designed, they don't actually give you any of the virus into your body. So there's no way you're going to get COVID. What you might get, if they give you the vaccine, is you might get a slight fever for a day or two. You might feel a bit poorly. You might have a sore arm, or just feel like a bit run down and like you've got a cold or something. If you're really unlucky, that can last for a few days. Generally, I see that as a really good sign, because what's happening is it's provoking your body to start getting ready to fight infection. So your body's having a practice fight so that when the actual virus comes, you're all ready to fight it off.
That's good to know. I've already had COVID, so why do I need the vaccine?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Because to begin with, we didn't know if you got COVID, if you could get it again, or if you were protected for life, or whether it was better to have the vaccines, if that gave you better defences. What we've found out is that if you've had COVID, you are much less likely to get it again. So having COVID does give you lots of protection. But people are starting to get it a second time. So although it gives you a lot of protection, it looks like that starts to wear off. And what they've done is they've looked at the people they've given the vaccine to, and actually the people that have had vaccines are much less likely to get it a second time. So if you've had COVID, you're protected, but if you've had the vaccines, you're even more protected. And then the real magic thing is if you've had COVID and then you get both the vaccines, then you're like super protected. So I always say to people if they've had COVID, you should get the vaccines as well, because then you're going to have really good, strong immunity.
I have a question. Why should I have the vaccine if I'm young and healthy?
That's a really good question. And so I've got teenage children, and so I've been thinking about whether they should have the vaccine or not, and then people in their 20s as well. Because what we do know is that COVID is much worse if you're old, and it's much worse if you're already poorly. But because it's a nasty virus, there's still a chance it can cause you real problems. So there are young people that still go to hospital, and sadly there's some young people that still die from it. So that's the first thing. The second reason to get it is for your friends and your family. Because the nasty thing, one of the nasty things about COVID is you can have it and not realise you've got it, and you can give it to people. You give it to your mums, your dads, your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, uncles and grandmas, and some of them might be poorly. And then you've given them an illness that could really make them very, very unwell. And that would be a horrible thing to feel if you've done that.
Can I ask, if people don't have the vaccine, can it cause a new variant?
Yes, it can do. And that's another really good reason to have the vaccine. So it's good to have the vaccine to protect yourself. It's good to have it to protect your friends and family. But it's also good to have it to protect your community, because the more people that get infected with the virus because they haven't had the vaccine, the more likely the virus is to mutate and come up with new and even worse versions.
I know someone who's had both their vaccine jabs but still got COVID. So my question is, what's the point of having the vaccine if you can still get COVID?
That's true. There are some people that have had the vaccine and still get COVID. But the really good news is that if you've had the vaccine, you're less likely to get COVID. And if you do get COVID, you're much less likely to have to go to hospital. There's a much smaller chance you go to hospital with it. There's also a much smaller chance that you'll pass it on. So you're much less of a danger to your friends and family if you've been vaccinated. And also there's this thing called long COVID, which lots of people talk about, and that can affect children, young adults, older adults. And that's when you get the COVID and you think you've recovered from it, but actually it's gotten into your brain or into your other like kidneys or lungs or just your general well-being, and you just feel poorly for months and months. And what we found is with the vaccine, even if you get COVID, you're much less likely to get the long COVID.
Does long COVID have any links to dementia rates?
I don't know. I need to look that one up. That's a really good question. I think what we know about COVID is that it does go into the brain. And so lots of people, when they've had COVID, they talk about brain fog. And so they can feel physically better, but their brain just doesn't work very well. So I got COVID, and for months and months and months, I was finding it hard to remember certain words. I would get my kids' names wrong more often. And it was difficult at work because I had to concentrate really, really hard just to get by. So it does feel a bit like you've got dementia, but I don't know if COVID itself can cause dementia. That's a really good question.
I've got a question. Do vaccines weaken your natural immune system?
The good news is that they don't weaken your immune system. In fact, what they do is they strengthen your immune system. So one of the most important things for humans is to have a strong immune system, isn't it? And we all know that there are some things that can make your immune system weaker, like some illnesses make it weaker. For example, like COVID makes your immune system weak when you've got it. But also if you keep people too clean, don't let them play about in the dirt and the mud and have fun with their friends when they're growing up, that weakens their immune system as well. But there are some illnesses that our immune system just can't get strong for because they never get exposed to it. And COVID is one of those. So if we get COVID, it takes like a couple of days for our body to even realise that it's bad, and then it takes it a couple of days to start working out how to fight it. And so that's like 3 or 4 days before we start fighting it, and by then we've got millions and millions of the virus in our body. So what the vaccine does is it gives you more strength to your immune system that you would never have had before without it. And all of your other immunity for other bacteria and other viruses and all sorts of things, it doesn't affect that at all. It doesn't make that weaker at all.
So when your body recovers from COVID, can you develop it again?
Yes, you're less likely to get it again, which is the good news. So if you've had COVID, you're much less likely to get it again, but there is a chance you can get it. And what we don't know is how long that immunity stays. So it's looking like some of our defense system, like 5 or 6 months after having COVID, the defense system does start to go down a bit, so we're less protected. And that's why they're talking about giving booster vaccines to people who are older or to people who are poorly, just to help push up their defences. The only way we're really going to know is to wait for a couple of years and see how long people's immunity lasts. And I guess that's why important if you've had COVID, although you are safer than if you didn't have it, you're still not 100% safe. So it's still careful to take precautions, to be careful, especially around people who might get really poorly with it.
How has the vaccine been developed so quick? So I believe it took a number of years to develop an effective and safe vaccine. This has been over a matter of a year, really, hasn't it? The rollout started about a number of months ago. So my concern is really, is it safe just because of how quick it's been developed?
If this had happened 5 years ago, they just wouldn't have been ready. The technology didn't exist. This technology is super fast. They don't need to find bits of the virus and replicate it and then weaken it and then give it to us like they used to. They just take a little bit of the code from it and they use that to tell our bodies how to protect ourselves against it. The other reasons it was so quick was that what holds it back normally is money, because you need to get people to invest, you need to go and ask for people to give you money or ask governments to give you money, whereas here the whole world was like, how much money do you need? And also because everyone was watching, they started checking the safety from day one. So instead of waiting for the vaccine to be done completely and then checking the safety, they were checking the safety all the way through it. So all of these things meant that they could develop it really quickly, and they knew by the time it was finished, they knew if it was safe or not. And it's actually one of the most tested safe vaccines in the history of the world now.
But if the vaccine's so safe, why are children not having it?
The reason we didn't give it to children first, well, I think there were 2 big reasons. The first one is the studies that they did, the tests that they did were mostly on adults, because they wanted to check it out on adults first before they tested it out on children, which I think is sensible. And it's only as time's gone on that we've realised that actually children can get really poorly with COVID, and they can get long COVID, and then it can really affect them. They can't go to training, they can't play sport, they can't run around with their friends. It has a long-term impact on them. And so more and more trials were done, and they've now given vaccines to millions of children across the world, millions and millions, and all of the evidence is that it's really, really safe.
I have a question. I've seen lots of news on the internet saying that a vaccine changes our DNA. Is this true?
The really good news is that it doesn't affect our DNA at all. the vaccine has no effect on our DNA. I think where those headlines come from is that one of the vaccines is called an RNA vaccine. And so what they did was they took a bit of the design or the blueprint of the virus, of the COVID, but they just took a little bit of it, and the spiky bit of the virus that can really make it stick onto our cells, they took a little bit of the design of how that spike was made, and they gave it, and they put it in the vaccine and they give it to humans. And so what our cells do is they see that blueprint and they make a bit of the spike. Now that's harmless because it's just the spike, it's not actually attached to the virus, so you can't get ill from it. But it looks at that virus and it starts making a bit of the spike, that code, and then it works out how to defeat it. So we're giving it practice. So it doesn't actually change our DNA at all. It just gives us a little bit of the code of the virus so that our body practices making it and it practices fighting it off. And then once it's fought it off, that code gets destroyed. So it's not left in our body at all.
I have another question. If we have 3 jabs, and you said that is 60 to 80% if we have 2 jabs of not getting COVID, will it be 100%? So if we do have 3 jabs, will we never get COVID?
The best way for us to never get COVID is for as many people in the country and in the world to get the vaccine. Because if they reckon if 80% of people in the world get the vaccine, then there's just not enough people left to spread it around. And basically the virus will just gradually go away. So the best way we know to get rid of it is for everyone to get vaccinated. And then making everyone safe is like the kindest, most compassionate, caring thing you can do for people you care about, is to get the vaccine. We don't know how to get to 100% immunity. We don't think the booster will give people 100%, but it definitely seems to increase their defences. So when you have it, we know that getting the second booster really increases you massively. The third one, we don't know how much it will go to, but it will definitely go even higher.
Tim, can I ask, what's the link between vaccines and blood clots?
And that's all down to just one of the vaccines. It's called the AstraZeneca vaccine or the Oxford vaccine. And this is the one that, to begin with, we used a lot in this country. And what they found was that some people, a very small percentage, just like 1 in 250,000, if you gave them this vaccine, they might get a blood clot. And it was to do with the way that it interacted with the blood in their body. That was particularly a risk if you're under the age of 30 and slightly a risk if you're under the age of 40. So what they decided was to not give it anymore to people under the age of 30 or 40 and to only give it to people over the age of 40. Because if you're over the age of 40, the chance of getting a clot from the vaccine is tiny. The chance of getting a clot from the virus is much, much higher, much higher. So you're far safer having the vaccine than not. But because of that little risk, we don't give that vaccine anymore to people under the age of 40.
Tim, what is actually in the vaccine? What are the ingredients? What is the vaccine made out of?
There's been lots of talk about all sorts of things being in the vaccine, like mouse brains or fetus cells or aluminium and different metals and mercury. None of that's in it. It is really, really safe. And I honestly would not be giving it to my patients if I thought I was injecting them with something that was dangerous or had dodgy stuff in it, because I just wouldn't be able to live with myself.
Are there any animal products in the vaccine at all?
No, there are no animal products in the vaccine. It's completely fine for vegetarians to have and for vegans to have. My daughter is a vegan. She's a really strict vegan. She won't let anything into her body that's got any animal products, and she has had the vaccine. And the Vegetarian Society have said it's absolutely fine to have. So if you're a vegetarian or vegan, it's fine.
I've got a question. Does the vaccine affect fertility and pregnancy rates?
That's a really good question, because there's been lots of articles on the internet and lots of people talking about, does it affect your fertility, or if you have the vaccine, does it mean that you can't get pregnant, or does it mean that if you're a guy that you become impotent? And the good news is that's all made up. There is no chance of it affecting your fertility at all.
If you are pregnant, is it safe to have the vaccine, and how do you know this?
So when the first vaccines came out, we were saying to women who are pregnant, we think you should probably have it, but we're not sure. because we just didn't have enough information about it, because they didn't do the tests on pregnant women. But as time's gone on, what we've found out is that it's really safe if you're pregnant. There's no increased risk of miscarriage. There's no increased risk of complications. There's no increased risk of having a baby early. So hundreds of thousands of pregnant women have had the vaccine, and there have been no bad effects to their babies at all. What we have found out is that if you're pregnant and you get COVID, then that is bad news, because you're more likely to have to go to hospital or to intensive care. The baby's more likely to be born early, and even sadly, you're more likely to have miscarriages. So if you're pregnant, by far the most important thing you can do is get the vaccine as quick as possible to protect your baby.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's been great for answering all our many questions. Just a quick one. What if people watch this film and are still not convinced? Have you got any more information or anyone they can talk to about it?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a big decision, isn't it? Especially if you've heard lots of scare stories. If you're still not sure, I'd recommend that you talk to organisations like FFT, who are brilliant, and you can really talk to your GP as well. If you've got a GP, always talk to them, because this is an important decision, and hopefully you'll come to the decision that this is the best thing to do, because I really believe with all my heart that it is.
Thank you very much.